and YouTube. We're about to start the Gillmor gang. Okay, let me get Steve into position here. And all righty. Okay, mute is off, and we're going to go in 3, 2, 1, and
hi, Steve Gillmor here. This is the Gillmor gang. It's a Friday. Joining us from New York is Frank Radis. Welcome, Frank.
Hello, Steve. Hello, gangsters. Great to see you. I've changed my background.
Okay, excellent. We just lost Michael Markman, so
I knew he didn't have long to go.
Keith Cheer, welcome.
Welcome indeed. It's a pleasure to be here, Mr. Gillmor, on your gang for this fine Friday, November the 12th.
all right.
Dateline.
Brett Leary, welcome.
Welcome. Do I look any different?
You look blue.
You look shorn.
Shorn.
Yeah, that
Let
means
me-
a
let me see,
haircut.
Let's
Oh,
see.
I did shave. I did shave, but I'm coming to you via the 1080p camera on my brand new MacBook Pro M1 Max.
Oh.
Okay. Well, we'll be having more of this commercial.
You look
once,
sharper. You look sharper. Even you look sharp, man.
I am also on my MacBook Pro, but I am
all right, hang on. Like I said, we're in the middle of introductions, and we've already lost Michael Markman. So, Dennis Pombriant, welcome.
Great to see everyone. I just have to say, Frank, your background, you say you're in New York, but it looks like California Street in San Francisco.
Yeah. No, that's from my terrace looking up Amsterdam towards 72nd Street.
Okay.
Right at the corner of 66th and Amsterdam, looking straight up. I just look to the right, and that's my view to the right. I turn around, I look this way, and I can see the river and Jersey, and a bunch of skyscrapers.
Cool.
Nothing like London.
There's Michael. Michael, can I hear some audio, please?
Yes, please. You can. I mean, yes, thank you. Here's your audio. Do you hear it?
Okay, yes, I'm welcome. Can you give us a lower third spiel?
Okay, sure. Hi, this is Michael from a rainy Northwest, Pacific Northwest. And we have flood watch in some parts of the state. Not quite where I live, but we're watching it come.
Hey.
All right, and we're making do with Xfinity broadband, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so a show of hands. I want one hand. Somebody who's going to start this show.
Uh-oh.
I'll pick it. Let's see a hand.
I decided not to raise my hand at the beginning of the show.
I know that was
Dennis's hand
last
went
week.
up, but then he wiped his hair.
This
I
would be
did
the
hearts.
This would be the best time if we were all together for you to say, whoever wants to lead, take a step forward, and like 5 of us take a step back and leave one of the guys hanging.
Hey, Mo.
No, that
Hey, Mo,
works.
wait for me.
I was in a band once, and we hated the drummer, but we didn't know how to fire him. So we broke the band up and then reformed without him.
And how long did it take for him to realize this?
I don't think he realizes it until he hears this show. I don't think he ever did. God, you guys were doing so great, man. Yeah, well,
Best of the Beatles.
I once broke up with a girlfriend by persuading her she should go and stay with my mum for a few weeks, which she did. And she never
Oh
returned.
my God. And that was the end of it?
Wow.
Was your mom in on it?
My mum was in on it.
In other words, she didn't like her either. And
Oh, that's a painful way to do it.
No,
It didn't hurt you, did it?
I was very young. I was an undergraduate at the time. And let's just say I was doing finals, and this girlfriend was not giving me any space to do that. So there you go.
Let's
It's
translate.
good to
Let's
know
see how Premier
I was going
handles
to say,
that.
Steve, it's good to know that he has priorities.
All right, so my priority is to get somebody to raise their hand and talk about what they want to talk about. All right, Dennis,
Oh, I got something to talk about.
Oh, yeah, now you do.
you were exactly.
That's pretty funny, actually.
All right, so we'll start with Dennis.
Stop. That's all I got.
I think we probably do a whole show on the economy and how bad it isn't, but how disturbing the numbers were this week that came out from the Fed. And I think that could easily segue into why are we so pessimistic about our future when so many things look good, and there's enough optimism around that over 4 million people quit their lousy jobs last month, planning to look for better ones.
I hope Michael is on the call because I think there's an answer to your question.
Who's Michael? And what
Michael
question?
Markman, remember?
Yeah, I do, but I
you
don't
think I have
recall
the answer?
listening to him.
Because
That eminent
the answer
international
to the
economist.
Well, take the great economic story and set it into a bucket over here, and take the fact that the Democrats do not have any understanding about how marketing is done. The Democrats need a new agency, period.
I think the Democrats need a lot, but that's not where I'd start. I think the both sides. I hate doing both sides because there's never both sides. But it strikes me that each side of the debate has forgotten manners, how to cooperate in a society, how to negotiate. And I was musing today that you could write a metaphorical Broadway show about the way we're interacting with each other based on the theme of, say, the whole country's forgotten how to engage in foreplay.
I wonder if part of that is, I mean, I could be wrong, and you could call me naive, and that would be fine. I've been called worse.
You're naive, Frank.
Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry.
I have been called worse.
Has
that,
anybody ever called you Sylvester?
No.
Okay.
Maurice, they've called me Maurice. Anyway, so that's a song too. The thing is, I think that
Look, he's trying to remember what he was going to say.
And behind the scenes, I think, in a civil and a managerial and a logical way, no matter what you think about it, in the end, I think the world ends up with a great bill because some of what was done behind the scenes and not in front of the cameras and not making a lot of noise was done the right way. What seems to be making a lot of noise and causing all this huzzarai is a result of the media jumping on the hottest story of the moment, which is never the nuts and bolts of an economic story.
Well, that's a very good point. And it's a point that I think you can only make in retrospect after you've got a very good bill. And we don't have a very good bill. We don't have anything right now.
Oh,
Well,
we're talking about the bill. I didn't realize that.
Well, no, we were talking about the
General
civilized conversations that would happen between two parties that seems to have disappeared, which I also agree with. I mean, for the most part, that's true.
Michael?
Well, since you raised the question of marketing, I think the first question that any marketer asks is, who am I selling to? What is the segment that I'm talking to? Who is this product for? Who is this message for?
I want to know what the product was.
Well, first of all, the Democrats' product is reelect me or elect my candidate. But the question is, who are you talking to? And the problem is that the country is very much divided into segments that have different interests and different priorities. There are some people who will be tuned to one kind of message and other people who are tuned to another kind of message. So it makes communicating very hard because you can't say the same thing to everyone.
I like what you're saying, but I don't agree with.
You've got the ability to segment the message, So, and especially if what the data has shown anyway is that people who are getting misinformed or getting it from online sources, primarily Facebook, So you actually do have an opportunity now to do it differently. I mean, I think that start with what the hell do the Democrats, what do they mean? What are they? What is this? What is this economic bill you keep telling us is so good that not everybody really knows about? And how does that affect my candidates coming up in the next two election cycles?
See,
I wanna
think it's
hear-
red
I wanna
herring.
hear
don't-
Dennis.
One of the fascinating things I think is something that you mentioned, Frank, which is the way the media covers this. They like to cover the horse race. They like to cover the nuts and bolts of negotiation. And I keep hearing interviews on, primarily MSNBC, where the host will say, people don't know what's in the bill. And the usually Democrat that they're talking to starts to enumerate what's in the bill, and the host isn't interested in that. They want to know what Manchin is going to say about this or that. So it's very hard to get that message through.
But I
filter
also want to
of
hear what
the
Manchin
media.
has to say about that.
Yeah,
Well,
but
sure.
you can't, you have to prioritize it. You can't hear what Manchin says.
If I have to
in a
choose
vacuum.
between the media's idea of what the story is and hearing what Manchin has to say about that, I choose Manchin.
Are you living in West Virginia?
Not unless you know.
Virtually,
If you're not living
yes.
in West Virginia, what do you care what Manchin
I'm on a
says?
Zoom call with West Virginia. So what's your point?
We're all
Well, my
West
point
Virginians
is that
today.
Manchin is the senator of one state, but he has a national impact. All senators do.
I want to
Especially
hear
if you
what
have a
Dennis was going to
50-50
say
Senate.
when he said, I like what you say, but I disagree with it. I thought that was the wonderful duplicitous opening to what was bound to be an interesting
Well,
next sentence.
that's what you like is conflict and chaos, right?
Conflict is great for TV.
Yeah, well,
You can't have.
this
you
isn't
can't have-
TV.
I like
We have
chaos.
literature without it.
I think conflict and chaos, we've had our fill of it. And I think that what we're interested in is, the direct information.
Yeah.
This is a simple lead in to a big story that Frank and I talked about on our inaugural Gillmor Gang Clubhouse.
Can I use that on my newsletter, by the way?
Did you?
No, can I? I didn't. I had tried to, I sent you a note and asked you if I could, and you never replied.
Well, I looked at the newsletter and it wasn't there, so I figured
No,
you made up your mind.
because you didn't say anything, I didn't know if you wanted me to use it. Sorry, I didn't mean to divert the conversation.
No, that's all right. The conversation is about the media disruption that Michael started referring to, and the fact that the mainstream media is now showing signs of tearing itself apart. And in specific, the Brian Williams resignation. Yes, and applause from Dennis about that. So, so isn't that interesting that this concern that we seem to share about the media and horse races and anxiety and drama being injected into something that we don't want to hear about?
We just got an interesting note from a viewer on this exact topic, Steve. A Mr. John Evdeman says, the media's story will always be whatever attracts the most viewers. They don't care about what's in the bill. It's all about the ratings. Conflict and chaos drive ratings, so the media will keep delivering it to us and dividing us.
I don't agree with that either. I'll tell you
Okay,
why.
why not?
I'll tell you why. The media will go after those stories as secondarily because there's no better story to go after. The better story would be if there were political leaders who were trying to turn the tide or make serious points. If you go back to the 1960s, liberalism was in the ascent, and one lone politician named George Wallace started calling liberals pointy-headed, and that had an effect. He ran for president and won numerous states. Gave the election to Richard Nixon. You go ahead 15 years and you get Ronald Reagan, who in the 1960s was pushing conservatism. And
Funny, both of whom were shot.
Okay, correlation and causation. Anyhow,
There are no coincidences.
yeah. Okay, my point is that those people were able to grab the attention of the public and the media and change the perception, the political perception, and actually do quite well politically. Whether or not their programs were any good is for historians to decide. But if you fast forward to today, who's out there saying, you know what, conservatism doesn't work? We've had 40 years of conservatism, and we haven't balanced the budget. Except when Clinton did it, we haven't had an economic boom based on tax cuts. We just keep making a bigger and bigger deficit. We don't do any of that. The Democrats are complicit by not aggressively stating their point.
You know, there are mediated and unmediated communications. And, you know, to go back to your opening question, why do we have so much pessimism when there is so much good economic news? I think the answer is every time people fill up their car, every time people buy milk, they get a message. And the message is uncomfortable. People don't look at macroeconomics. They look at, do I have a job? Did I get a raise? Are my kids in school today? How much did I have to pay for gas?
Not if you're in Seattle, they're not in school, right?
But Dennis's thesis seemed to be, hang on a second, hang on a second. Dennis's thesis seemed to be that we're better off than we think we are. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so how does that jibe with what Michael just said?
I didn't quite. Okay, so I guess we're looking at through two different ends of the telescope. Michael's looking from the micro side. I'm looking at the macro side. Even with the inflation that we have, you know, you can still get gas. Maybe you have to drive a little bit less. Maybe you have to drive a little slower. You can still get gas. You can still buy food. There's plenty of money sloshing around in individual household accounts. Witness the 4 million people who quit their jobs without having anything else to go to in October. So, you know, I think things are better than we think. And I think one of the problems that we have that is determining how we feel is that we're making these invidious comparisons between 2021 economics and 2020 economics. I was just reading something online and looking at the numbers from the Fed. And if you compare 2021 with 2020, yeah, inflation is up 6.2% because a year ago, the economy was on its knees and inflation was barely anywhere. But if you compare 2021 with 2019, you still get an inflation rate, but it's much more gentle. And I think we're doing ourselves.
I can give you another example of that. You know, we have some supply chain issues, and you do see some empty shelves in some sections of the supermarket. But if you compare that to the height of the COVID shutdowns, where you had huge empty shelves with many things that you simply couldn't buy, we're much better off now. But people don't make that comparison. They make the comparison that, oh, here's a little empty shelf in the supermarket, without going back. So people are very short-sighted.
Michael, I think you're right. And it goes back to leadership. Who's out there banging the drum, saying, you know what, things aren't that bad. Yeah, we got some problems. Here's what we're doing to fix them. Joe Biden isn't doing that.
No.
Who in the administration is doing that?
What was the last Joe Biden speech that you listened to? Because he does do that. It just doesn't get through.
Frank, what were you trying to say?
Well, yes, I just heard, where did I hear Biden? He actually was, it wasn't at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. It was wherever he spoke just before that, which was in Baltimore, I think. And yes, he does mention it, but it's not memorable. You don't walk away from that speech going, oh yeah, we are doing great. Thank you, Brandon. What I found interesting about in this whole conversation is just kind of like three things going on here. Michael made a point that actually I don't think was the point he was trying to make. So if the language, Michael, that you were using to describe the people that most need the results of this current of the bill, that the Build Back Better bill, or the are people who need certain things. They want to make sure that they have a job to go to, or that their children, that there's childcare, and that they can send them to school, and all of the things that are in the bill. Pretty frankly, normally spoken language, was easy to understand what you were talking about. Don't hear that very much on television. And you have to read a lot into a New York Times story going down to the bottom to get past the grandiose big language of what's in the bill. Infrastructure, schools, parents. No, it's
Well, one of the problems is that there are so many components to the bill that any long list that has more than 3 things overtaxes most people's short-term memory.
Yeah.
So you won't get it. If I mention more than 3 things that are in the bill, you won't remember any of them. If I mention 1 or 2, you have a chance of remembering them.
So I think it's important to distinguish between governance and politics. Politics is dominated by short-term, three things on a list, like Michael was just saying. And you don't win at politics unless you can speak in talking points that are reduced down to single statements. But governance is totally separate, and the economy is much more related to governance than it is to politics. Governance is about what you do to make a significant difference to everyone's life, often measured in years, if not decades. And so I think the right context for the infrastructure bill is to teach Americans about governance and the long term, and winning and losing in the long term versus short-term sound bites. And that's very hard, but no one tries. The Democrats play the sound bites game badly. The Republicans play the sound bites game fairly well. But the long-term governance game is totally different. The Democrats have way better of a strategy than the Republicans there. But
What would that be?
Say that again.
What would their way better strategy be?
Well, governance is about spending money.
No, what would the Democrats' better strategy be?
The infrastructure bill embodies a lot of it. It's spending $1 trillion on meaningful things that are going to produce jobs and growth.
In support of Keith, I read something recently that I thought was absolutely fascinating. In the first 2 years of George Washington's administration, go all the way back to the beginning of the country. First 2 years, you know what Washington did? He got on a horse and he went to every place he could in the 13 new US states to say, here I am, and this is what your government is. And basically he sold the idea of the United States to people in Pennsylvania, Virginia, New York, Delaware. And I don't know, maybe it had a good effect. I think a lot of people got the idea that their government and governance was more than what was going on in the state capitals. And it seems like that's the kind of thing, you know, we got Air Force One, it can stay aloft for 24 hours. It's got photocopiers, it's got internet, it's got a lot of stuff. Nobody uses it as a strategic tool. They use it to go do ribbon cuttings in Omaha.
I have a sense that that this upcoming sort of administration tour in support of the bill, to explain it, maybe one of the first times that a ball like that can get rolling in favor of the things that the Democrats are trying to do. But we really have to see how that goes, because they were talking about that. And I don't know, I mean, each of the cabinet secretaries, you've seen Buttigieg a couple of times on the Sunday talk shows this past Sunday.
Right.
So that's good. And he's probably, interestingly enough, taken the one job that would have been the most boring, yawning job in the administration, and turns out to be the key job in the administration, if you ask me. So he's central to that, but so's housing and urban development, and so's the healthcare, and so, you know, and so on and so on and so on. So there's somebody in the administration. I would send everyone out except for maybe the head of the post office, to make noise and make sure it's covered.
I agree with you.
One of the
Okay.
huge obstacles that they run into, though, is that there's a large segment of the population that doesn't care about the economics as much as they care about cultural issues and racial issues. And so I don't care if you're going to fix my broadband. If you're going to be giving money to Black people, I don't want you.
I wonder though if there's not, and it hasn't been a story that's been widely disseminated. I guess because it probably looks like it's like going down some kind of race mile alley, and that is, how will the bill affect those people who would normally be those folks that you were just saying would be against anything in the economic side of that bill? So how does the bill affect the people who are looking at everything from a sort of a cultural position? They're affected too. I'm not sure, me personally, I don't know how they're affected, but darn, everybody has to ride on the same roads. Everybody has to go over the same bridges. Everybody has to go under the same tunnels. Everybody's children goes to the same school for the most part. So, and, they're all in the state hospitals and so on and so on and so on. So, I mean, I just think that a lot of that gets forgotten in the conversation.
But it is, Frank, it is, this just occurs to me, it's fairly pathetic that a nation that's the most powerful on earth is fixing bridges and roads as opposed to building high-speed rail or whatever the future is. Why isn't it building the future? Why is it patching up the past? Well, because it was neglected.
Yes. So I think that the idea of build back better, to me, in my mind, that's something that can be played on that hasn't been played on, because, there are certain things that are going to go forward but yes, you still have to patch some things up. I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree with you.
Frank, put on your marketing hat and explain to me why anybody is really going to be impacted by somebody running around the country on Air Force One, talking about how great this incomprehensible bill is.
Well, first of
from
all,
a marketing perspective, I mean, that's
First of
something
all,
you know about. I don't
first of all,
understand
it's
that.
not just him. It's all
right.
it's all.
All right. And
second of all, he draws the cameras. He absolutely draws the cameras, which means the coverage, and the coverage over a long period of time equals its volume. So it's reach and frequency, which and as long as the message, and here's the reason why the message has to be so succinct. As long as the message is succinct, make America great again. As long as the message is succinct and has meat behind it, at least believable meat behind it, and it's told a lot, and it's all across the country, and it's in every newspaper and radio and television report and online thing, and your people are available to, from a marketing perspective, you throw that into a 2-month block, and that's powerful. That's from a marketing perspective, that's very powerful.
But doesn't it have to have?
I would
Doesn't it have to have? Doesn't it have to have an audience?
And the audience is built into the news channel.
Doesn't it have to have an audience that is interested in the information? I mean, as Michael, I think,
I don't think so.
Let me tell you what I think when I'm trying to gather the news. I'm interested in the following stories. How has the federal appeal of Trump's, stonewalling documents and testimony, how's that going? And my bet is it's going to go badly, and that he's going to continue to win in terms of stalling.
Yeah, he's going to run out the clock.
All right. So running out the clock means that we're going to punt down the road to late 22, when the Democrats are kicked out of the House and probably the Senate as well. At that point, what are we going to be interested in terms of information coming from the public airwaves?
Oh, nobody will certainly care about what we're talking about right now when it comes to that. When you get to that point, you're in a different place. I'm just thinking right now that what needs to happen has to be tactical. And look, I think that's
Who?
what's important. The
Yes.
Democrats, they
Oh.
have to be aggressive and tactical right now.
I
They
disagree. I think they have to be strategic. I mean,
I think their strategy is built in. I don't think that they can move their tactics without having to have the strategy. So either that's built in, they know where they're headed, what road they're going down in order to do that, because you just take the two bills and put them together and say, look at that, there's the path. And,
no,
and
well,
here's-
look, what do most Americans think about America? They think it's broken. They
Yeah.
think, and I'm generalizing here, so there's going to be some people who think these things and some people think some of the other things I say, but they think there's too much immigration, not enough jobs, there's too much export of jobs overseas, there's too much spending on things that don't matter. I mean, if the list goes on and on and on, most Americans are not upbeat about America. So how do you change that? Well, you actually have to be upbeat about America and have a plan that makes that real. And you can't do that in a week or a month or even a year. It has to be a grand vision. It has to be not exactly the New Deal, but something that has the gravitas of a New Deal. And that was kind of being promised. And I think the infrastructure bill is, a little piece of that, but not enough to make a difference. And if you don't do that, the narrative gets owned by basically racists and nationalists who are running for cover and want to stop the rest of the world.
Brent, what do you think about, is there anything about what you've heard so far that you think is going to be successful?
I just think that generally speaking with America, let's just face it, if things stay pretty much the way that they are, the people who benefit from the way it is are happy. And most of those people are the ones who are able to counteract anything that other people try to change. Because I think, was it Frank that said it? They're just, or I think it was Michael. Some people, as long as they feel like they're not at the bottom of the rung, they know they're not at the top, but if they feel that they're at least better off and have the ability to look down at some folks, they're okay with the status quo. They don't have to be at the high end, but as long as they're not at the low end, and as long as they can, talk their cultural stuff, they don't care about, the big, bill that may help 80-90% of the country, because they're the 10% that like it like this because they already got the stuff. So I think it's just going to be tough. I mean, this isn't a new phenomenon or anything. I mean, there's always been very few at the top, a big middle section, and some people at the bottom. And the people in the middle section, I think in general, are okay with it as long as they get, they have a good job and they can do their trips and travel and live a pretty, nice life. So they're not too upset about, the status quo. The guys up top love the status quo. It's the people at the bottom, and there's usually not enough of them, or they don't have enough power to really make a big change. So we go through these dances every election. If we get these people in, we'll be able to change. But as long as those few folks at the top have their say, not a lot happens.
Well, if you look at that taxonomy, that's one dimension, top, middle, and bottom. But there are a lot of other dimensions to look at in terms of segmenting people. I don't know if you noticed the latest Pew Research report on the taxonomy of the American population. They divided things up quite differently. They found 9 particular segments based on attitudes and ideological preferences. And I think that has a lot to do with people's receptivity to one message or another. Some of them are really concerned with racial injustice. Some people say, no, we don't really have to do anything to fix it. Some say, no, we have to do a great deal to fix it. We have to do systemic things to fix it. And some people say we have to make things a little better. There are a lot of people who will recognize that there is racial injustice, but they have different attitudes to what you do about that. And a lot of people say, don't need to do anything about it. It's fine the way it is.
Well, to me, what Brent described as the middle is accurate when looked at from the point of view of economics. But if you look at it from the point of view of optimism versus pessimism about the future, most people are pessimistic. Very few people are optimistic about the future. And the Democrats need to be the party of optimism, because that's kind of what differentiates them from the Republicans. And to be the party of optimism, you have to have a plan. And the plan needs to go beyond the infrastructure plan. It needs to be remaking America to be competitive with China and the rest of Asia in the 21st century. And I don't hear that plan.
Why do you think that, why do you think that, I have a
question.
question. Why do you think that Biden and President Xi, is that his name?
Yeah.
Of China, why do you think that they are seeming to come together around the issue of methane and climate change?
I think they have to come together because they share the global, let's call it the canvas on which the future is going to be built. And they both recognize that they can't ignore the other. Both recognize that. But the difference between them is that Xi is an optimist because he has resources and growth behind him. And, starting from a lower base, everything looks up. Whereas America is the opposite. It starts from a very big base and the future looks down. So the real challenge for Biden is to redefine America as having a future that's better than the past. And that's not easy, by the way. I'm not trying to trivialize it. It's really hard, but it involves some serious commitments to modernization.
Frank, you're shaking your head.
Well, yes, it does require serious commitments, but everything I'm hearing here from almost everybody, I know it's not this simple, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Democrats need a new agency. They don't have a message. If they have a strategy, they're keeping it very tight. They haven't gotten out there and said anything the way that the regular people want to hear it said. So everybody's saying all the same thing. We're all going around in a big circle around the same thing. It's not as simple as getting together and having a branding meeting and putting colored dots up on the wall next to names and things like that. But the point is, there is a way to get to where you need to be. It doesn't feel like they've done that. That's my opinion.
You're pessimistic because you don't think the Democrats have good enough marketing to sell their plan, or is it because you don't think they have a plan?
No, I think they have a plan, and I don't think they're selling it right. And I think that all of that points towards lower popularity numbers or lower numbers for Biden. It actually allows him to become the target of finger pointing. The whole where's Brandon thing is just like insanity. That it's allowed to continue on. I just thought that, by the way, Steve, when you brought in the idea of the stall on the part of Trump and his paperwork, I felt like, we've just put on the brakes and made a hard right turn. But actually, we haven't. The point is, everybody is allowing this stuff to happen.
I disagree, Frank. I think they have a plan, but it's not a good enough plan for the challenge that they face. And I do think that, it's interesting. The Republicans don't need a plan because they say the market fixes everything. So what they want is almost no governance and just let the market figure it out, which of course we know leads to Brent's scenario of rich and poor getting wider apart. And now that was true during America's ascendancy. The market did kind of solve many problems. But in this next era, you need governance, active governance with a plan in order to do well. And so it should be the Democrats' era. It should be the era in which they excel, because the market alone won't do anything other than take America further down. It's got to be governance that takes America beyond going down.
You know, though, it's funny, all of this conversation, one of our viewers has just chimed in with something that I think is absolutely critical and key, and we haven't even mentioned it once. And that is, people want to see an end to COVID.
That's what I was
And I have a sense that that as good as we're doing, take a look at the UK. The UK is not doing as well as the US, but both groups are doing way better than they were. That's a story. That's a very important story, and that's the big story in the end, quite honestly.
And this is what I wanted to jump in and actually ask you, because I'm hearing about all this, that everyone's got all this negativity and that really shouldn't be there at this point of time. Isn't the virus just casting a pall over everything? And if so, do the Democrats or the Republicans have an answer for that, or can they really move the ball? I mean, it seems like, we're all just being held captive with this damn virus. And
yeah, exactly.
Look at how that's played out. I mean, if you track, I think you can track Biden's approval numbers with the case numbers on COVID. He came in and one of his big promises was he was going to get it under control. And for a while, it looked like that was happening. Shots were going into arms. People were getting checks. The numbers were going down. And then suddenly we had a resurgence. And the promise that he made didn't come true. Now, on the other hand, you have Republicans who are running against public health. They're running against masks. They're running against vaccinations. And they are hoping for the virus's success, because they've made an issue of personal freedom versus public health.
But
that's
I think
absolutely right. But the Republicans are running out of time. It's a stalling tactic, and we are getting closer and closer to herd immunity. And when that happens, you're going to see the virus, new cases and new deaths begin to plummet for reasons that you can't understand. And so this is another case where the Republicans are trying to run out the clock. They're trying to keep the virus going.
I track the statistics in my local area, and there was a big spike through much of the country, including where I live, that started. And since then, although we have very high vaccination rates, those numbers have been coming down very, very slowly. Every time I look at them, they're slightly lower, but they're not plummeting.
Right. And then,
the problem with
and then you've got a situation like Colorado, where it seems like there doesn't seem to be an answer for why the cases are going up. I mean, I haven't heard anything or read anything that speaks to that. And there's, is it a precursor to the next wave?
I don't know.
The answer is the heating season.
I don't know why anyone is surprised. I think you go out. Sure, you go out in the cosmopolitan parts of the country and you'll see people wearing masks, and they're still trying to social distance, and the restaurants are being very specific. I mean, I actually got vax carded today when I went in to do something at a drugstore. It was pretty specific. The rest of the country, if you watch the media, looks like nothing's changed. And I think that's what's happening with the spikes.
But Frank, I was just in my hometown in the UK, Scarborough, and nobody, I literally mean nobody, not even in a cab, was wearing masks. So to me, the virus is now what I would call an independent variable. That is to say, The science has done what it can. We have vaccines. We now have therapeutics coming. People are people. They'll do what they'll do. For the most part, we're safe. And I don't know that a government could do much more than it's doing to make an impact. I think it's kind of done, short of putting
Mandates.
the National Guard on the streets and pointing a gun at you if you don't wear a mask. They've kind of done it. Mandates are coming, and they'll help. But the virus is going to still spread even amongst people who have been vaccinated. And
Yeah, but
it's just not as dangerous.
I got to cut this short because Brent has to jump.
Okay.
Basically, I'm hearing two things from about this discussion. One is that the virus is winning, and the other is that we have a reasonable shot at herd immunity, as Dennis described it. Which is it? What's your take right now?
I think you've mischaracterized it. The virus is not winning, but the virus is not losing either. The virus is fairly well controlled, but not controlled. And when we talk about the virus, we're not just talking about its impact on people who become infected. We're talking about its impact on society.
Yeah.
People feel in some parts of the country very strongly against the restrictions that come from trying to control the virus.
I understand. That's what Tina was saying. What I'm trying to get at is, and I know how much you in particular, Michael, like predictions. So I'm okay with you not playing along. But frankly, do we think that by January, February of 22, which is when the real campaign starts for the midterms, do you think that you individually, do you think that we are going to be on the way to herd immunity of some kind or not?
We're already on the way to some kind of herd immunity.
What?
I say I agree with Dennis. We're already on the way to your herd immunity. I mean, these are not binary issues. These are issues of degree.
Well, I think the
Can
thing-
I get an answer from Brent then?
I think we are, and I think because kids are now getting vaccinated, I think that was kind of a key because I live literally next door to a guy that I've been my neighbor for 22 years. He was a school bus driver, and he died in September from COVID. And I would not be surprised because around the same time that he died, I believe the number was 12 bus drivers in Georgia died and around that same period. I have to believe that the herd immunity is a really good shot now because kids are getting shots. And I think in the mandates, some of the mandates, even though people fought it, it looks like the mandates will work. So I'm hopeful in that regard. I'm hopeful that because of kids are able to get safely vaccinated and because there are mandates for some folks who wouldn't have done it, I think we are. There's one caveat though, and I cannot believe this. There's a doctor that came out and was giving anti-vaccine doses, like things that she said will basically work against the vaccine, which to me is incredibly insane. But apparently there are people out there who want to say, yeah, I had it, for a mandate purpose, but then want to try to undo whatever the vaccine. Of course, it doesn't work, but the mere fact that there's a doctor out there, selling this and people are buying it is just crazy and a sign of, yeah, we may get the herd immunity, but we're not going to change a significant amount of people's minds around this stuff.
And I don't think we should even try anymore. I think right now, as much as could be done is being done. I think herd immunity is a process, not a fixed number, but we're definitely approaching it. And I think we're going to have to live with this virus in whatever form it takes, pretty much for the foreseeable future anyway. So it's a little bit like that phrase, survive and prosper. This is all about survive. Well, I think we've kind of done that now. So now let's figure out how to prosper.
Okay, has everybody weighed in? Frank, what do you think? Is it herd immunity or bust?
It's probably herd immunity. But I don't think that's the only answer. I don't know what the other answers might be, but herd immunity is going to be the key.
Well, we're running a natural experiment every 6 months when the weather gets cold and heating season comes in and you have to come indoors and you have to rebreathe air. You see cases start escalating from the north south.
Yeah.
In the spring, when air conditioning season starts, you see cases rising from the bottom up. And sooner or later, you're going to have so many dead people and so many people who've got natural immunity from getting sick that you will achieve herd immunity. It's really inelegant given the science and the technology that we have, but that seems to be the path we're on.
Yeah.
Brent, thank you. We'll see you again next time.
Brent, wait a second.
Hang on, he's got to go. He's got a hard
I got
stop.
the key question for Brent. We can't talk about it without
Well,
Brent.
you can ask the question and he'll answer an email.
I'll let you know if I can do it quickly.
Yeah, who's responsible for the deaths in Houston?
Man, that's not a question that I want to answer with and then just say bye on. So
Yeah, I know. That's why I was going, yeah, that's an incredible story. And it's so deep and it has so many tentacles. It's too bad we didn't have time to talk about it today.
yeah. All right, guys. See you guys later.
Thanks
Do I-
again.
So
Yeah.
let's react to Dennis's first question about why people are pessimistic. And I'll give you my answer of why I'm pessimistic. And that has nothing to do with Democrats' marketing. And it has everything to do with the way the Republicans are trying to rejigger the way elections are held, the way elections are counted, the way elections are certified, the way Republicans are trying to rejigger gerrymandering. I'm concerned that no matter how much marketing and how much coherence there is to the Democratic program, it's not going to matter.
Heck, these guys are going to get away with rejiggering what people thought about January 6th.
Well, it's all related. It's January 6th. It's the threats to election officials. It's the threats at school boards. It's the whole notion that elections are only legitimate if Republicans win. If Republicans don't win, there's some cheating going on. We're in a position where the very foundation of democracy and election by votes is, I think, in some jeopardy.
You know, back in the day, people used to be able to do something bad and then get caught for doing something bad and then pay some price for it. I have this sense now that people are getting away with everything and not paying any prices for it.
Yep.
Look, pessimism is rational if you're past your peak, it's rational. So is America past its peak? Well, you don't really know the answer to that. My answer is it could be, it's possible, but it depends what government chooses to do. They have the power to make the answer no. So most citizens, I think, believe the answer is yes, it's past its peak, and they think their children are going to struggle to buy houses or pay off student loans.
But what's different than that from the generation that preceded us and the one that preceded that? Seems to me that's always been, I don't mean to throw up, it doesn't mean that I'm making a hole in your cheese, because I think this is something that particular thing is something that has come up generation after generation after generation. I'm not sure that that's the right
Well,
thing to do.
yeah, but before, in previous generations, I mean, if you do it in broad brushstrokes, the first half of this century was America's massive growth period during the two world wars. After the World War, it reigned supreme from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, despite ups and downs in the economy. But now there's a very real likelihood that that era is peaked.
Yeah.
So now it's rational to be pessimistic. Before it was irrational.
I love-
Yeah, but don't forget.
I think
don't forget
one
there's the
issue there, what
cyclicality
you're
of
saying
history
is that-
to draw
sorry.
on here.
Let's see how long that.
The cyclicality of history. I agree with you that we're at sort of a pessimistic time, but historically, when that happens, the paradigm shifts, the paradigm changes. The paradigm that could easily shift for the United States has a lot to do with capitalism and the way it's practiced in this country. And the whole Build Back Better legislation is aimed at the heart of that old paradigm and changing it. So we are at a really important pivotal point. If that bill passes in any shape or form, if you can put $1 trillion towards changing the paradigm, it's a new game.
I just love the line that pessimism is rational. That's become the new thing I'm going to put over the door when I leave my room, and so I can bang on it like Ted Lasso.
Well, if that's true, why would you want to
I
leave
think you
your
should
room?
remember this, that after World War II, the United States had a pretty clear field because World War II was not fought here. World War II was fought everywhere else and put a lot of former powers at a big disadvantage compared to the US. We've had a period of half a century or more where the rest of the world has been able to build themselves out of the hole that World War II left them in. So they've caught up with us in a number of ways. So now the question is, what is our sustainable advantage over other countries?
It's ironic, I guess, that correct me if I'm wrong, that the American road system was created to move goods and services for the war effort from coast to coast, or from the middle of America out to each coast, and that was.
Well, no, that's not entirely true. It was partially a defense bill, but that was after the war. The interstate came up in the 50s, not during World War II. Those highways were built for the war effort.
Part of the post-war
Boom.
effort, the boom, based on what you were just saying, it certainly was part of the boom after the war, and not long after the war either. I think, if I'm not correct, did it not start just before Korea?
No, just after, about 1954, 56, right in there.
Okay, so.
It was an Eisenhower program.
In any case, it seems to me that that there was one lasting thing that was promised and delivered.
Yeah. Just a parenthetical here. The reason defense is associated with the highway system is because it had to be passed and written into law by a Republican president. And that Republican president and that Republican Party didn't want to do anything that looked socialistic or New Dealish. So
put military next to it, and it doesn't.
They put defense next to it.
Yeah. Okay.
They did.
That
wasn't the only bill either. There are lots of bills. For example, I got a national defense student loan to go to college. There was nothing national defense about it. It was just.
I mean, wasn't there a requirement for the interstates? Wasn't there a requirement for the interstates that large segments had to be built straight and flat so they could be used in an emergency for runways, for airplanes to take off and land? How often do we stage aircraft from our interstate system?
Well, that's a really interesting point. That is one of the rationales of the Autobahn in Germany, which was built in the 30s, which Eisenhower so admired that he wanted to come back to the United States and emulate. I don't know, Frank, can you land a 747 in downtown Manhattan?
Nope. No, but
Just checking.
but you can land one on the Hudson.
Yes.
Ish.
That wasn't a
Landish.
747.
No,
But you can't take off.
I was taking a little bit of
Dramatic
literary
license, yes.
just a tad.
So I'd like to go back to something Michael said about what was the thing that, what do we have in our portfolio to move ahead in terms of, what's that big word that you wrote a book about, Dennis?
Sustainability.
Sustainability. Yeah. Can you restate that briefly, Michael? And then let's see if we can talk about
what is the
you just
basis
said.
for, what is the basis for a sustainable competitive advantage for the US against other nations at this
Great.
point?
All right. So
And let me
anybody
add
have-
one thing to it. Most of the economic engines of this country are now transnational corporations. So they aren't, they may have been founded and headquartered in the US, but they're not strictly US entities anymore.
But therein lies the reality of the era we're living through. National boundaries are a relative concept, not an absolute concept. And economics transcends them and takes the form of companies, but also money flows, debt, all kinds of things that are global. And the reality is that the flows are always reflect strength. So, that's the nice thing about economics. Money goes where it makes more money, and it usually tries to find ways around it. It's a little bit like TCP/IP finds a way through a broken network. Money finds a way to make more money, and increasingly that's global. So the concept Dennis talked
So
about.
can you apply what you just said to what Michael said?
Yeah. So the reality is that the center of the world is going to shift to Asia, and sustainable global economics is going to be Asia centric for the foreseeable decades.
That's the answer to his question about what we as a country can do.
Play.
The answer to my question is
What
nothing.
you can do is play the
So you're saying that the answer is nothing.
no,
That's what-
the answer is
No, that's what the guy who asked.
okay, give me a chance. Give me a chance. Give me a chance. The answer is
I'm waiting.
the answer is called the productivity of labor. That is to say that you can produce more stuff faster and more cheaply than anyone else.
I would disagree. I think you make some really interesting points, but historically, the sustainable attribute of the United States has always been freedom. It's always been the case that if you wanted to make your fortune, you went to the United States. If you wanted to invent something, you went to the United States. If you wanted a big market, you went to the United States. There are lots of examples of other countries that have tried to overtake us. So, for example, in the 1980s, we were all soiling ourselves over Japan, and the Japanese were coming to get us, and
They were buying every big building they could.
they were buying impressionist art. They were building better cars, and ultimately it failed because they didn't have a society that was flexible enough to take advantage of the freedoms that they have. Now you look at China as a competitor, or you look at Russia as a competitor. They each have enormous strengths. They have strong militaries. They have productive capacity. I don't see Russians inventing anything other than hacking, and they used American-made hacking technology. I don't see the Chinese inventing anything. They're stealing IP.
No, not Dennis. That's a bit unfair to China. I mean, look at their infrastructure. That they invented the high-speed trains with Japan, by the way. By the way, look on the roads. How many cars do you see that are American versus Japanese or German?
Where?
Anywhere in the US
Or Korean, by the way.
or Korean?
The,
Yeah.
the Detroit has about 50% of the US market. I checked it.
Yeah, which is a lot less than it used to have, right?
You go back 40 years and GM had half the market. Just GM.
I don't think you can characterize Japan as a failure. It's 100 million people on a bound island, so there's always going to be limits. But Toyota is certainly not a failure. Samsung in Korea is not a failure. Sony is not a failure.
Because they all came here. And
Well, they came here
exercised.
to sell. They came here to sell.
Interestingly enough, though, I feel
Bill.
that it a little bit, I feel like I understand what you're saying, Keith, and I understand what you're saying, Dennis. There was a sense that the Japanese tried to make a mark over here, and it failed. That failed. What didn't fail was the mark that they've made sort of quietly. And you know, one of the things that's significant of both cultures, and even the Russians, is patience. And so it was a matter of letting things work themselves out. And but I hear what both of you guys are saying, and I think they're both very good points.
Well, also there's a big difference. I mean, obviously a domestic market of 120 million in Japan can never eclipse a domestic market of 300 million in the US. But a domestic market of over 1 billion in China can.
Mm. Oh, I think you're absolutely right about China.
Dennis, do you agree with that?
Well, here's the thing. Over time, in China, that might be true. There aren't 100 million people, or there isn't a 1 billion people in China that have access to all of the economic benefits that you would ascribe to them.
Yeah.
So I think right now, as a practical thing, China is roughly the size of the United States as a market.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, we've got to be concerned about what happens when the other 600-700 million people in China
Start buying things.
Yeah, gains economic maturity.
Yeah.
That's not here right now, and you have to look at what's going on at the People's Congress in China right now, where Xi is being touted as one of the great thinkers of Chinese history, and is probably going to cement his hold on power for the indefinite future.
I must
All of
admit,
that-
I'm actually interested to read. Apparently what he's done is he's rewritten the history of China from his point of view, which
Yes.
only Mao and Deng did before. So actually, just on a personal level, I'm interested to read it to see how he's redefining it and what it means.
Yeah. But you
Do
take
we have to
that,
look at all this as a
you have a
zero-
thumb on the scale in China that you don't have in the United States, and that's why I keep coming back to the United States principal sustainable advantage is its freedom.
Do we have to look at this as zero sum?
Hang on a second. Hang on. Michael, go ahead.
Do we have to look at this as zero sum? Does one country have to go down in the scales for another country to come up?
I think the answer to that is just mathematically that tends to be true.
If you have an expanded economy, you're increasing the size of the pie, not just stealing slices.
No, you're
from other
right
people.
there. You're right there. It's a relative change. Like the British economy today is, I believe, bigger than it has ever been, even during the empire. So it hasn't stopped growing. It's grown consistently year after year, but it's no longer the world leader. So America, this is all relative. America is not going to go into decline. America, it would be shocking to me if America went into decline. What is going to happen, though, is the world stage is going to grow massively. The pie is going to grow, and a big chunk of it's going to be based in Asia, not just China, by the way. Indonesia is huge. India is huge. So that's just a shift, and America can benefit from that in the way the Brits did by carving out ownership. Like the City of London still owns things that it really shouldn't, because it managed to negotiate holding on to them. Over
So does the
decades.
Prince.
Yeah.
All right, so Michael, has this addressed your question about sustainability, or is the answer continuing to be we're screwed?
No, it has. I mean, I think when I phrased the question in terms of sustainable advantage, I think I was in some way determining a bad answer, because I think we can have sustainable prosperity and a very high standard of living and an improved standard of living without necessarily being the number one economic power in the world.
Yep.
Can we have sustainable
I think
freedom?
if you look at measures of, for instance, health outcomes, standard of living, happiness, it's not the richest countries that come at the top of those lists.
Yeah. I also think we'll do better the more we cooperate with China and Asia, and do worse the less we cooperate.
Yes, which is why I mentioned this agreement to come together and at least talk about methane.
Yeah.
I consider that to be an enormously positive development.
Yep.
Okay, anything else other
that's-
than your anything else? I'm sorry, I need to keep driving this forward. It apparently it really needs me to be involved.
It does.
Thank you. What about the MacBook Pro?
Oh,
We've
you
already
mean-
lost Brent, who is completely thrilled and happy with his new
You
MacBook.
did that on purpose. Your block, it's completely gone there. You have to lose your background, Michael, if you want to show us
Okay.
your story.
That's all right. I just pretend that you've seen one. I'm in the process of setting it up, so I can't talk to you about
Well, I
how
don't
much I like it.
understand. How could you have possibly done this show and stopped setting up your MacBook? I would never do that. I would go, oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't
What
feel
are
good.
your priorities?
No, but
I'm good.
you would tinker with the microphone. But,
Oh, well, I was, you know what? I'm really upset because
no, don't change it now, please.
I got a lavalier. Well, you can't see it. See, same thing.
So I am also using one, but I use an external camera, so I'm not using the camera from it. But I had an M1 13-inch MacBook, and this is now the 16-inch that's got the M1 Max, and the experience is quite similar, to be honest. Unless you're crunching video and transcoding, I think the 13-inch MacBook M1 is just great, and it's way cheaper. This one's going to be good for me when I do transcoding videos and things like that. But other than that, you don't notice the difference.
Did you get a terabyte of memory or?
I got, well, there's memory and storage. I got 2 terabytes of storage and
Storage.
and 64 gig of memory. And that's just because I use about a terabyte of storage anyway. So I need spare capacity. So I got 2 terabytes.
Well, both of those memories are big enough to make easy use of any video apps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the keyboard is the biggest change, like the 13-inch
works?
MacBook, it's a very good keyboard, whereas the one on the 13-inch Mac has that digital strip at the top, which I personally kind of like, but most people hate.
No,
I thought
like
that
it.
they
I like
got
it as well.
that for the next generation. The new generation of the 13-inch doesn't have that, I thought.
The new generation doesn't have that digital strip. They've gone back to a just plain vanilla keyboard, but
Yeah.
it's
The
very tactile.
13-inch MacBook Pro does have it.
Yes.
I'm looking at you on it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I have one to sell. If anybody wants the 13-inch MacBook Pro with 2 terabytes of storage and 16 gig of RAM with the strip, I have one to sell. I'll give you a 20% discount from the store price.
Luckily, nobody's watching.
Yeah, I can save that for, the worst thing for me is that I'm literally about 200 yards away from the Apple store.
It's not
It's
good
like-
for your checkbook.
No, it's like being 200 yards away from Denmark Street in London.
Oh, by the
I
way, I
don't
just,
understand the reference. What does that mean?
Denmark Street it's the street in London where everybody goes to buy musical instruments. It's kind of like 47th Street used to be when Manny's was next door to Sam Ash, and it's that in London.
Denmark Street for music, Tottenham Court Road for tech.
Yeah.
And what is
And, my office
what-
was right.
how many,
between- right there. Yeah.
Sorry.
What?
how many Apple stores are there in New York?
I know of three, but I'm sure that there's at least one in each of the other boroughs, if you think of New York City as 5 boroughs. But in Manhattan, I know there's 3. I don't know, there may be more.
Yeah, well, I'm from
I think
Manhattan.
there's at
so
least 4 in
when
Manhattan.
I say New York, I mean Manhattan.
Yeah, I don't know where the 4th one must be uptown somewhere. There's 2 downtown, there's one at 50, it's 55th Avenue, one at on Broadway. There's one down in Soho. I
By
don't
the
know.
way, anyone who hasn't got a good
Grand
pair of
Central
earbuds,
Station. The answer is Grand Central Station.
Apple just released the Beats Fit Pro, which are $200. They're these tiny little earbuds that do everything that these guys do.
Do they noise cancel?
Yep, and they're noise canceling. They have pass through. They have everything.
Are they in ear or they slip on
In ear, they're tiny. They're really tiny. They don't have the sticking down bit. They were reviewed by.
Can we stop with new tech? That please.
Wired reviewed them yesterday. Said they're the best earbuds that Apple makes.
Fantastic. That's just great to hear. Yeah, terrific.
I've got some being delivered in the next 10 minutes.
My wife is here in New York with me for a few more days. I can't do anything for a few days.
Yeah, got it.
And I'm gonna get down. She's like right outside the door.
So
We may have talked over. So
almost watching.
Oh, you know what? At least I was able to sneak a guitar in. I bought a guitar while I was on the road.
There you go.
I don't know how I'm going to get it back to London quietly, but
This is a 1% show for real.
It's
See,
like,
let me
look,
say something.
look what I found in baggage claim.
I spent less than $200 for probably the best guitar I've ever owned. It was more like 130 US dollars. Unbelievable. And turns out a whole bunch of major studio guys and performers are buying these guitars. It's literally crazy what you can buy now for almost nothing in terms of great musical instruments. Really surprised.
And this is because
Well, they're made in Indonesia and China and places where, for example, they take all the old Coca-Cola cans and turn them into bridges and tuning nuts and things like that. So what might have cost a lot of money costs not very much money at all. Thing is about these kinds of guitars is that they're made to be taken apart and put back together.
what's the brand name?
Squire. They make a $139 guitar that is as good as anything that your money would. If you want to spend $600 or $700 to $1,000 for a guitar, you're okay to buy one of these. Spend $5,000 for a guitar, that's different. That's what I don't tell my wife about. As I've said a million times before, when I
love how
die,
you lower your volume
Yeah.
as though that is going to make a difference.
a million times before, my wife will probably sell my guitars for what she said. She thinks I told her I paid for them.
Yeah, that's a Trump problem for sure.
That guitar only cost $50. I bought it in a pawn shop on the way back from Savannah.
My wife buys stuff from Nordstrom Rack, and she always opens it up and says to me, "You'll never guess what this cost." And
$6.
I'm always convinced she's lying through her teeth.
No,
Of course
you
it
should
is.
never answer that question.
Yeah, I always go really low. I say $10. She goes, "Well, no,
Me
it wasn't
too.
that good."
Yeah, joke answers are.
$50. This Fender guitar cost $50. Man, they did not know what they had.
Guys, I have to drop off. I apologize, but I've got to go.
Me
Have a good
too.
weekend.
All right.
Right.
Thanks to everybody who showed up. I'm doing this backwards now. It's like I can't say what it's like. Uh,
Thanks to Brent.
Thanks to Brent Leary. Thanks to Keith Tier. Thanks to Frank Radis. Are you two guys going to stick around? I don't think so.
I'm out of here.
Okay.
Ciao, man.
Well, I said Frank
Bye,
Radis.
guys.
Chowda.
Thanks to Michael.
Thanks to Michael Markman. Are you less pessimistic, happier
Well,
than you
no,
were?
I'm still very worried about the next elections.
Yeah, I did, but we didn't talk about that. We talked about China. Did that make you happy?
No, I did talk about my concern over the next elections.
Yeah, you did.
But we didn't go.
But-
We didn't
but
go into any
we did
depth,
not.
but I did bring it up.
I agree. So what I was talking about is the other things that we talked about where we all talked about it.
Oh yeah, well, I was never pessimistic about that. I was
Okay,
very
so,
optimistic about it.
all right. Dennis, are you less or more pessimistic after this call?
I would say I'm realistic. And as I've mentioned to you in one-on-ones, I'm trying to focus more these days, not on all those things I can't do anything about, but on my future and how I live this next and probably last part of my life. And that's a project. And the political situation is background to it.
Thanks to, yeah, I did. Thanks, Dens. Okay,
Well, thanks, Steve.
you're welcome. Thanks to our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor.
Thank you, fellas. Nice show.
Thanks to everybody who showed up and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Sayonara.
And